Cool. Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here. And I got here last night. My flight was delayed from New York, so I landed at 1 a.m. And between getting a lot of love from immigration and getting a taxi, I got to my hotel at like 3 a.m. And I was like, this conference better be good. And honestly, it has been. I've been really impressed with the speakers, the Halifax startups. I've been taking a lot of notes and photos. I think it's been like a great combination of tactical, strategic, really diverse. I'm digging it. So kudos for everyone who organized and all the speakers. Really impressive show. Yeah. And then the other thing is, I don't think I've ever spoken to so many people, so I do need to take a photo and send it to my mom. So if you guys humor me and maybe wave. Hi, Mom. Yes. You guys are awesome. Thank you. All right, cool. So I'm super excited to be here today and talk about data journalism and hacking PR, which are two of my favorite marketing topics. Really excited to share with you. Let's see. All right. So just a tiny bit about myself. So the left side of this is all about building my geek cred with all of you. So I'd like to think of myself as a geek first and foremost, and have been geeking out for like a while now. So does anyone know the screenshot on the very left with this G thing? Yeah, it's GeoCities. GeoCities is maybe like the Medium of like 1996, like Medium.com, but way back when. You could have a website on it. So I had a website. It was kind of like a blog before blogs were a thing. It was apparently one of the first blogs in Israel, which is where I'm originally from. So that was cool. The green screen is a BBS, which is how people used to communicate before the internet. Right after like the Stone Age came the BBS. And then bottom right is Delphi. It's a development environment for Pascal, which is a programming language that I used to code in. So anyway, I was a software developer. I did computer science in undergrad. Then I switched over to the evil side, and I went to business school, got my MBA in the US. I worked at Amazon for 3 years doing product management and online marketing for Amazon Books in Seattle, and then running online marketing for one of Amazon's fashion sites. Then I led marketing for a B2B startup called Castora in New York. You'll hear a bit more about it later on. And then after 3 years at Castora, now I'm doing my own thing. I have a small marketing consultancy, and I work with B2B and B2C startups on marketing and growth challenges based in New York. But you did not come here to hear about me, so here's the plan for the rest of today. Gonna give you some context and talk about data journalism and what it is. Then I'm gonna talk about very specific real life, for my life, case studies. And then I'm gonna try and wrap it up with a playbook that you can try and implement and think about for your own startup. And hopefully we have some time for Q&A, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and questions and whatnot. Cool. So data journalism, how many of you know what it is, heard about it? Awesome. So not many people at all, which makes it either really easy for me or really hard, we'll see. I can basically say whatever I want, and you guys will be like, oh, yeah, cool. But I'm not going to do it this time, I think. Anyway, so what is data journalism? I thought I would give an example. So does anyone know or recognize what this screenshot is? Yeah? Sure. Exactly. So the New York Times back in 2013 took a research from Harvard about dialects and different words that people use in the US based on where they live. And then they turned it into this interactive quiz on their site with 25 questions. This one, I think, asks you, how do you call a yard sale? I mean, that's what we call it in New York, but when I was living in New Jersey, they actually called it a stoop sale. So a bunch of different terms for the same thing, and then it will diagnose you and tell you where you're from. So the gist is that you're using data to create content, and you could be the New York Times doing it, but you can also be your own startup doing it. And in terms of mass media now using data to write data-driven content and articles, it's definitely not just the New York Times. At least in the US, it's very common, and it's getting more and more common. So the top image, there's a whole section in the New York Times called the Upshot, which is essentially dedicated to data-driven journalism. Bloomberg Businessweek have been pretty famous for doing a lot of data visualizations, infographics, again, a lot of data and research-based content. The Washington Post has been doing so much of it so that at the end of 2016, they actually compiled a list of, I want to say, 20 examples about data-driven articles. So it's very common, it's growing very fast, and it makes sense with the proliferation of data, collecting data, analyzing data. It makes sense for us as consumers and also business professionals to want to consume content and articles that are based on data as opposed to just opinions or gut feel or narratives or stories. So the opportunity for us as startups, software companies, B2B, B2C, is as following. So this is the New York Times note from this dialect quiz that I just showed you. And what they're saying is that basically they took the data for the interactive feature from a Harvard study. And it's a study that started in 2002. It's been done by Harvard professors. It's a legit thing. But the gist is that the New York Times, as arguably the best content source in the world, does not have access to such data, right? They need to rely on Harvard or on other sources, which makes sense. The New York Times is amazing at writing content, creating compelling presentation, packaging it in a way that interests consumers, not necessarily good at collecting data, analyzing data. That is changing for the New York Times, but most publications are not focused on collecting, analyzing data, which is where we, as startups, as tech companies, can come into play. So essentially, the opportunity is us, tech companies, both B2B and B2C, like Jawbone, OkCupid on the B2C side, Chartbeat, App Annie on the B2B side, using the data that we already have implicitly. We're collecting it from our users, from our prospects, from our customers as part of what we do, sometimes as part of our product, sometimes as part of our marketing. We have the resources to collect it, to analyze it, and then to package it in a way that will interest and attract both mass media publications like the New York Times, Forbes, the Chronicle Herald, which is a thing here, I think. I was trying to cater to the local audience. Anyway, all the way to trade publications. So when we're in B2B, for example, and really in B2C as well, we want to be, someone was mentioning, we want a party where our audience parties. So if I'm selling to marketeers, it makes a lot of sense for my content to appear in marketing land, despite the fact that its circulation is a bit smaller than the Wall Street Journal. WWD, for example, is the Wall Street Journal of fashion. Farm Journal is apparently the leading publication for agriculture technology. So if you're selling to farmers, you'd better get on Farm Journal. And with data-driven content, you have the opportunity to appeal to any content publisher in the world. And here's a great example, really a textbook example of how this was implemented. So App Annie is a software startup. Basically, they have analytics for mobile apps. So they know your ranking in the App Store, in the Android App Store, and so on. They put so much emphasis on data and data insights that they have a whole index that they publish on a regular basis with the top apps and so on. And this example, it's from 2 months ago, amid the latest Uber, I don't know, however you want to call it, crisis. App Annie provided some data for the Washington Post about how Lyft was actually gaining ground over Uber, and Lyft, at least for a while, was the #1 ranking app in the App Store. And you can see that it's a Washington Post article, and literally the very first thing in the article is a screenshot from App Annie's data. So if I was head of marketing at App Annie, I was pretty pleased with myself at this point. Brand credibility, great distribution. This is an awesome opportunity. And the reason I'm so excited to talk about this to you as startup marketeers, just software marketeers, and also maybe specifically as people who are not necessarily in the Bay Area or New York, is because I think this channel offers a lot of opportunities for people like us to stand above the crowd and to really achieve our marketing goals effectively, even if we're very small. So data journalism, if you think about it, is a subset of content marketing. Content marketing, if I were to ask you, do you know content marketing, I think everyone's hand would raise. But content marketing is hard. It's hard to execute efficiently and cheaply. The example I have here is Googling customer segmentation, which is something that one of my topics in my previous startup. When you Google customer segmentation, you see articles from companies like HubSpot and Marketing Land, not to mention Wikipedia. It's super crowded. It's hard to get yourself to rank well in Google, as we just heard. It's very competitive if you want to buy some AdWords against it, as we also just heard. People, by the way, are consuming less and less content through Google as they're shifting to mobile. Facebook and other gatekeepers are becoming the gateways to content. So it's very hard to execute content marketing effectively at scale and drive results from it. However, I would argue that data journalism is content marketing that can actually work for you as small startups that are wherever you are in whatever stage, even with a small marketing team. So my first point is that you don't need a huge budget to create data journalism. This is not necessarily about your writing skills. It's about packaging the attractive data that you should already have from collecting it about your users and customers and so on. Package it in a way that's appealing to other resources. And that ties to my other point, which is distribution. If you have unique data, if you have an interest in insight or analysis, minimally package it can get you to distribution, and we'll say it in my case study, to distribution that is equivalent to the New York Times and so on. So you can get to scale distribution spending relatively little money. You don't need to hire content writers. You don't need to hire a team of data scientists. You can do it on the cheap with a small team. You can also hack PR, which I'm going to talk about, to get to distribution. And in terms of marketing goals, so I assume that a lot of you, for your content marketing and just in general for your marketing activities, two of your frequent goals are generating leads or sales or revenue, and also brand awareness. So clearly, if you're getting an article, if you're getting a mention in the New York Times with your name, helps your brand awareness and credibility. And you can also use this content for generating leads as well. Also for keeping your existing leads warm. You can use it for nurturing leads. You can use it in active sales conversations. So it can be really a cornerstone of your marketing that you reuse in pretty much every other channel. And I think these are like big words, but in the case study that I'll walk you through, you'll see how it really comes to life. So now, assuming that I convince you that data journalism is cool and worth investing in and it drives results, you might be saying to yourself, okay, but I'm not App Annie and I'm not Jawbone. How can I do it as a small startup, as a startup with a 2-person marketing team? So let me tell you 2 stories from 2 small startups that I've been a part of. So this is my previous company, Castora. This photo is from about 2014, January. I think we were 11 people here. That's after we doubled in size from like 6 to 11. I was the 6th employee. I was the head of marketing. I was also the marketing team. Here in 2014, we added like another person. So I had like a gigantic team of 2 people, myself included. And the guy up there on the top is the data scientist, the senior data scientist that we had in the 2-person data science team. And he and I worked on the case study that I'm going to share with you as part of our job, right? We weren't fully dedicated to this. And just to give you context so you will understand the examples better, 2 words about Castora. Castora does marketing analytics for medium to large size online retailers. So we sold marketing software to companies like Zappos, Ann Taylor, Guess, J.Crew, and so on. And our goal with our data journalism was to basically make us look much bigger than we really were, because when Zappos decide to buy marketing analytics, they want to feel like they're buying it from a credible company and preferably not from a 10-person startup that's going to go under in like 6 months. So credibility, awareness, lead generation, sales acceleration, all of these good things. And what we ended up creating, and that's been a journey of, in total, let's say 2.5 years, but significant milestones along the way, we ended up creating something called the Castora e-commerce pulse. It's still live today, castora.com/pulse. It's basically an index of e-commerce, US e-commerce stats around things like mobile transactions, marketing channel, e-commerce growth, and so on. So in total, we had a collection of 7 different stats. We would publish these updated stats on a monthly basis. We would do deep dives on a quarterly basis on things like mobile e-commerce, fashion e-commerce, and we used it as a platform for our data journalism. And essentially what we did was taking all of our client data. So we had about 100 US e-commerce clients, and we had access to all of their e-commerce transaction data. Our data scientists compiled all the data, did analysis, and the gist was extrapolating from our e-commerce clients to the US e-commerce industry. And that's what we presented. So you can see here a couple of examples. The first one is e-commerce transactions by mobile device. The other one is e-commerce transactions, the distribution by marketing channel. So you can kind of intuitively feel that this has good mass appeal, how this might be interesting to, obviously, people in the e-commerce industry, but also to broader mass media publications. Now, before I go any further into how we developed it and distributing it, as they say, the proof is in the pudding. So I want to share the pudding with you before. I want to show you some of the results that we got to, and then I'll talk about how we did it. So again, this is over the course of 3 years, but basically, even starting the very first year that we did this, we got our CEO, that's the guy with the curly hair, on TV. The very first year that we did this, he was on Bloomberg TV talking about e-commerce on Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Ever since every year during the holiday season, which is when e-commerce is most interesting, he was on TV talking about our data. Top left, so we got our data, the monthly stats, into the Bloomberg terminal, which is what finance professionals all over the world use for data. So it's used by like 50,000 finance institutions. At some point, Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, mentioned our analysis on 2 Apple earnings calls. And it was because part of our data talked about how iPads and iPhones drive most of e-commerce in the US as opposed to Androids. So it went pretty well, and I'm not putting this up there to like whatever, hey, I'm awesome. It's more like these things can drive results, real results, even as a one-person operation behind all this. In addition to TV and these good things, we were essentially in every single industry publication in our space. So you can see total retail, internet retailer, retailing today. Might not mean a lot to you. It didn't mean much to me before I started in e-com, but people in e-com read these things. We were also, especially during the holidays, in a lot of mass media publications, Forbes, Washington Post, Time. The left image is cool mainly because you can see that our data is right next to IBM and Adobe, slightly bigger and more well-known companies compared to Castora, at least for now. And the right image is a Fortune article about mobile e-commerce where the reporter essentially took our graphic, put it in the article, which was pretty cool. So this worked pretty well for us. In a certain year, in 2015, I think, data journalism brought about 1/3 of our sales leads, which is a substantial volume. Brand impact is harder to measure, but anecdotally, we got a lot of compliments and people mentioning that, oh, wow, I thought you were like a 100-person company, and apparently you were not, and that's pretty surprising. So this was considered a very successful effort at the time. So now I want to talk to you how we actually did it, and there was nothing, there was no rocket science. There was some data science, but no rocket science and no groundbreaking technical hack. It was a lot of hustle and a gradual process that I can assure you any one of you can do. So the data scientist and I compiled a list, or actually I compiled a list of industry questions that I thought would be interesting. And that would be my recommendation. Don't just let the data scientists or the data people or the engineers run the show. Have someone from the business side or product or marketing involved in packaging the data in a way that's appealing and attractive to the external world. Then it took the data scientist about a month or maybe a couple of months to do like a one-off data analysis. So pull our data, run the analysis to answer my questions, and then we started marketing the results. Over time, we saw that it was working, it was producing interest and leads. He worked on automating this machine so that every month he didn't need to redo the manual analysis, but we got to a place where we had an automated framework that just pulled the monthly numbers, he would check it, but it was very minimal effort for him. So we started small, saw that it did well, then we scaled and also automated, which is probably a good framework for any marketing channel. Then one of my favorite topics, so you saw all these awesome logos there, the Washington Post and Inc. and Time and the Journal, and you might think, oh, okay, she must have used like a PR agency to get to all these reporters. So for the first 2 years, I was the PR agency. I don't come from a PR background. I had no connections. The third year, we took a PR agency. That was after we scaled. We raised the Series A. We took an agency. They were great. The results weren't like 3 times better. They were better because PR agencies do come with their Rolodex. So we got some new articles, but it wasn't anything that we couldn't have gotten on our own had we invested more time. So what we did with PR, people here already mentioned Upwork. I would say if you're in a small startup, the one thing you should take away from this day, or at least from my session, is Upwork. It's an amazing platform for outsourcing or sharing manual work that doesn't make sense to do here or in the US to countries where cost of living is lower, so you can get more affordable, basically, workers. So with Upwork, I built a list of all the publications that I thought would be interested in our e-commerce data. Around the holidays, this is quite a few because every publication is interested in Black Friday, Cyber Monday data. I had Upwork find all the contact information for all of these, for all the relevant reporters, retail, tech, marketing in these publications. And I think the first year I had a list of over 1,000 reporters that then I reached out to. Initially, it was using Gmail. There are a lot of tools that let you do like a mail merge and mail a lot of people through your Gmail and still make it look like it's a personal email coming from you. Because reporters don't like, first of all, they hate getting like newsletters or emails that look like a mass email. They want to feel like you personalized it for them. Even if the personalization is exactly the same thing as you wrote to the 20 other retailers that cover the exact same beat, they want to feel special, don't we all? At some point, Castora moved to Marketo, email automation, so I started using that. But even really a spreadsheet and Gmail, that was how we got the first TV appearance. And in fact, this is the email back in 2013. I don't know if you can see it, but super simple text email. I sent it, I think I sent it like Black Friday. It was, hi, have a bunch of stats, mobile e-commerce, this and that. Our CEO is available. Then I got a reply from a producer at Bloomberg TV asking if our CEO would come and speak. And you know, they tell you there's this saying that the happiest moments of your life are not going to happen in front of your computer. Well, this was a pretty cool moment in my life. I was pretty happy. So, I mean, just imagine me sitting in our dinky office with like 5 guys around me and getting this email about Bloomberg TV. It was pretty cool. All right. Cool. So PR, great channel for distribution. Washington Post would be great. Another great channel is partnering up, and that's something that you can do not just with data journalism. It's great for events and webinars and so on. But specifically for data journalism, if you're a small startup, this is really valuable asset that you have to offer in exchange to partnering with companies that are oftentimes much bigger and have a much bigger database than you do. So you can see here we did a holiday webinar with Marketo. Marketo was probably like 1,000 times bigger than Castora, and I'm not even like exaggerating, like literally 1,000 times. And they were psyched with our data. They saw us somewhere, and they were like, they actually approached us, asking if we would do a holiday webinar with them. You can see some of the other companies that we partnered with. All of them were much bigger than us. And the cool thing is, again, I'm going back to this like party where your customers party, because it's a really cool phrase. These companies is proverbially where our potential clients party. Email marketing, it's a bunch of like e-commerce software providers. And partnering with them and having access to their customer and prospect database, which is huge for us in the early days and all the way through. And this is something that's much easier to do with data journalism as opposed to just like, oh, let's do a webinar because we're both in the same space and it could be interesting. And we'll talk about thought leadership. Data wins over thought leadership, at least in my space. Another really strong benefit to data journalism is that sometimes with content marketing, you're like, oh, what am I going to write about? And how do I repackage and reuse my content that I invested so much in to make sure that I'm getting the most out of it? With data journalism or data-driven content, it's really easy to build an entire multi-channel campaign around this content. So the Castor e-commerce Pulse was the platform for us, and it actually became its own brand. And around it, we built a whole host of other campaigns and marketing programs. So you can see here an example, one of our quarterly reports specifically about fashion online retailers, and it was a data report that we produced. We promoted it in email newsletters to our prospect and client database. We had a webinar about it with one of our fashion clients. We even printed a print report. By the way, print is another, I think, underutilized channel in B2B marketing, and there are a lot of cool things that you could do with it, and it's relatively inexpensive compared to things like sponsorships or conferences. Anyway, that's just a side note. We did landing pages and other web campaigns around the same content. So because the content is so rich and valuable, you can reuse it in different formats and mediums to cater to people who prefer one medium versus the other, as opposed to a piece of content like an ebook or a listicle or best practices guide, which are oftentimes less unique and therefore less appealing. Cool, and so that was the Pulse, and just to convince you that this is not like a one-time thing and I'm not a one-trick pony, yes, thank you. I'm going to briefly talk about another startup that I currently work with, where we are essentially replicating the same playbook. So Kiwi, another small startup, the marketing team is 3 people, woohoo. What Kiwi does is it works with big publishers in the US on distributing their content on Facebook. So what it means that the data that Kiwi has access to is Facebook data for all the big publishers in the US. So what we did at Kiwi, and I've been working with them for a few months now, these 2 articles are from a month ago and from October, we identified that Digiday is the #1 publication in our space, and we really want to get on Digiday. So yeah, we did an ad campaign with Digiday, but we were also looking for ways to get some organic and free visibility on Digiday. So we created 2 pieces of data journalism and content, one around the elections, a very fertile ground for anything data related. We basically looked at how do publishers, what do they publish on Trump versus Clinton, and how do people engage? So that was the left side article. And then we did another data story around Super Bowl. So that's another very common subset of data journalism, where you use the calendar, holidays, just like pop culture events or general events, and you latch onto them and you add your spin with your own data. So you don't even need to come up with original ideas. The calendar helps you, or just life helps you, and you do your own analysis on these events, and it's pretty easy to get press attention because reporters are looking for a fresh new angle on the elections or on the Super Bowl, and your data is unique, it's new and fresh, they love it. Cool, so I'm gonna leave you with an abbreviated version of this playbook. which is me trying to summarize what we talked about. So the genesis to all of this is your data. If you have no data, yes, it's going to be hard to come up with data journalism or data-driven content. But my message is that, yeah, the data needs to be interesting. I would argue that at least for your industry publications, your data is inherently, by definition, interesting. Unique, yeah, it's a nice value add, but like you saw in my previous slide, we were competing with our data against IBM and Adobe, and because we were able to provide it quicker, be more responsive to reporters, we were still able to take share in the data journalism competition from IBM and Adobe. So if someone is already doing it, yes, try to find a fresh angle, but don't stress about it too much. Second thing, you need a partner to partner with you on data analysis. And I put science in brackets because even with the Castora Pulse example, it wasn't data science. It wasn't AI or big data or machine learning. The guy I partnered with basically did some statistical analysis. So even if you have like a product manager or if you're handy with R or other statistical analysis software, sometimes that's what you need. It doesn't need to be predictive or whatever, artificial intelligence or anything like that. Like you saw in my example, starting small and manual is definitely the way to go. These things can be a black hole that draws you in, and you can spend a lot of time doing the analysis. So start small, see if you get some traction, and then grow and automate, and building it into a machine, into an index that you publish on a monthly or quarterly basis. I would call this the Holy Grail, and building a brand around it that people know this is the place where I want to go to get data on the agriculture tech industry. That should be your vision. For distribution, PR, publications both in your space and also mass media, your own database of leads, clients, sales opportunity, and also leverage partners to distribute your content. And think about this as a cornerstone to multi-channel, multi-program campaigns that you can run around each one of these pieces. So that's it. I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, do we have any questions? Oh, we got one back there. So far for me to run back there, but I'm getting there. No, we got it. I'm only doing the first row, actually just these 3 tables. Anything else is way out of my exercise.
It's been a long day. Question for you on at least trying to bring disparate sources that may speak to a similar problem, but maybe let's talk about would be in a different vertical or different genres. We work with a lot of apps and games that would be functionally similar to each other, but across different types of games, as well as different audiences and play styles. Wondering what your thoughts are on trying to, again, with access to massive mounds of data, what's the easiest way to tell a common story, or what's the best way to sort of jump off?
I mean, it's a good question. I don't know your space at all. The way I would approach it is probably looking at your industry publications or whatever your sales prospects are reading and seeing what stories are interesting to them, and then brainstorming questions that might be interesting. If it's apps and games, I don't even know the data that you have, but things like who's using it, what time of the day, time of the year, geography already always does well, like the Yamli example that was mentioned about which cities are the most healthy, so maybe which countries are using games the most. I can just, you know, the same way that I can rattle these off without knowing anything, I'm sure that you can come up with like 50 different questions that your data can answer and would be interesting.
Maybe as a corollary, because again, the space is not really blue ocean when it comes to that basic level. A lot of the partners that we work with have done the basic
Yeah.
when's the best engagement time for re-engaging someone who's been lapsed.
Yeah.
I think that maybe I'll flip it around and say, what's the best kind of question I should be asking myself when I'm trying to build the kind of content around what the narrative should be? Can you maybe speak to that?
Yeah, so something that I'm actually going to do now with Kiwi, the second company I talked about, and that's related to hacking PR. So building relationships with these reporters is really important and helpful. And with Digiday, I actually have now 2 distant relationships with 2 reporters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to meet one of these reporters for coffee, and I'm going to ask them, I'm going to say, we're going to develop an index about publishers on Facebook. What's the data that you're going to be most interested in, or that you're going to cover, essentially? Because he's my audience, and if he's interested in something, he knows his audience the best, and that's like a good way to get a sense of what's interesting for him and my audience. So that's one way to go about it.
I'll actually walk over to this one. It's not too far.
Have you had any pushback from clients that you might have because you're technically using their data for your benefit? Or I assume maybe in your terms and conditions, there's just that little fine little print that no one ever reads.
Yes, you're right on both. Our terms and conditions at Castora did specifically include us being able to use their data in aggregate and anonymously and publicly. You know, we did get pushback, and we were also self-policing to make sure that we don't accidentally reveal anyone. So when we were doing the fashion index, that's a smaller subset of retailers. If we're talking just about shoes in fashion, then it's pretty easy to grok that we're talking about Zappos. So we were careful about not revealing the identity of our clients, and it hasn't been a problem. You need to have a good compass of like what's cool and what's not, and it is nice to have it in the contract, even though at Kiwi we don't have it in the contract, and we haven't gotten any pushback yet. I think people nowadays are more and more used to the fact that their data is kind of getting sold, repackaged, advertised. Not that I'm necessarily a proponent, but that's kind of the world we live in.